what was the main motivation and driver to, for you to want to end qualified immunity? Was there a particular situation that happened in your life or something that you saw that really affected you?
Yes, my main motivation was the loss of my nephew, who was actually killed by Columbus police in 2017. He was the first body cam case, period, in the state of Ohio, where you saw a man get killed on camera and take his last breath. As a matter of fact, they lowered the volume down for the first 60 seconds and they covered the camera up 5 times too, so the public couldn't see what they were doing. So they shot my nephew twice in his back. When he hit the ground, they shot him in his face and in his neck. Of course, the officers were found justified of killing. They got qualified immunity. They said they feared for their life. So that's what started me down this journey, looking for police accountability because my family got zero zip.
But I would like to introduce Mr. Kyle Pierce to the channel. Thank you so much, Kyle, for coming.
And thanks for having me, James.
Yeah, so you're part of the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. And as far as my channel is concerned, quite a few people are adept to knowing what qualified immunity is, but there's some people who may be new to the channel who may not know exactly what it is. If you can give a purview exactly to what qualified immunity is for the audience so that they can know what it is, so they can follow a little bit more easier.
Absolutely. So qualified immunity, it only applies to civil cases when, say, an officer or any government employee violates your rights. Then when you try to sue them through the courts, the civil courts, you have to overcome this thing called qualified immunity, which automatically applies, and you have to prove that it should not apply in that case. And this is something that came about from the what is called the Ku Klux Klan Act back in the late 1800s that allowed people to sue individual government employees or people that are acting under the color of law who violate a person's rights. Well, fast forward to the mid-1900s, and the Supreme Court rules, oh, wait, actually, if they were acting in good faith, if they were just enforcing an unconstitutional law, they get this qualified immunity. And then later in the 1980s, they decided, well, qualified immunity applies if the law is not clearly established. And so what this clearly established hurdle means is that there has to be a prior case that is almost exactly like the case that you're trying to bring, in which someone has won that case against the government. And the best example I can use of that is actually here in our Circuit Court of Appeals, encompasses Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. In Tennessee, there was a gentleman who was detained by officers. He was sitting down, had his hands up, surrendered, and the officers sicked a police canine on him. And they got qualified immunity when he went to sue because the similar case, the person was lying down and not sitting up when they had the police canine sicked on them. So it is any minor inconsistency kicks this case out the window and allows qualified immunity to be applied. And so people don't get restitution for damages done to them by government. They don't get any form of justice because qualified immunity typically is almost impossible to overcome.
Yeah, so you guys also have the formal definition here. It says qualified immunity is a legal loophole that makes almost impossible to sue government officials and politicians when your constitutional rights were violated, as you so adequately said. So this means that even if the government violates someone's constitutional rights, it may not be held liable if the law on that specific issue was not clearly established in the time of the violation. And this is just really this is the allowance, the permission to allow police officers, or as we say, state actors, to act basically carte blanche to do whatever they want, in the name of the state. This sounds extremely. I'm trying to purse my words carefully here. but it sounds draconian. To be honest with you, it sounds anti-democratic, because you cannot actually use your voice to say this person in this government position violated my rights, and so therefore they can't be held accountable for that. That just doesn't sound right.
Exactly. It's like you said, it's it goes against everything that this country is supposed to be founded on. The very basic tenet is a government accountable to the people. And if you don't have that, then you don't have anything stopping these government actors from violating people's rights or using unreasonable force or just getting away with heinous things.
Mm-hmm. And the crazy part about it is that everybody knows a story about police brutality, right? Mm-hmm. We all have seen it happen. Lest we forget 2020 and all the moments of police brutality that were recorded on our cell phones, right? In 4K for people to see, especially because they were protesting an act of police brutality against the rights of a man, where he was laying down on the pavement, and he had an officer kneeling on his neck for over 8 minutes. And so the crazy part to me about this is that it is still 3 years afterwards, and we're still trying to fight this battle of ending qualified immunity. Now, my question to you is, why do you think that this is such a hurdle to go over? Like, what are the obstacles in place that are keeping this draconian law in place, so that we really can't get we can't get justice for what was violated against us?
So and I would like to clarify, this is not a law. This is just a Supreme Court decision on the law that allows you to sue government officials when they violate your rights. And it's called this Section 1983 of the Federal Code is what allows you to bring those suits against government agents or people acting under the color of law. Congress has always had the authority to clarify their intention and say actually qualified immunity does not apply. They've always had the authority to abolish qualified immunity, and that was one of the biggest things that held up the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, was that it would have gotten rid of qualified immunity. And even a single issue bill in the federal Congress, I believe it was simply titled the Ending Qualified Immunity Act, and was, I think, a sentence or two. It would have just ended qualified immunity. It had Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian co-sponsors. So you had the entire political spectrum introducing this bill, and it still couldn't get passed. And one of the biggest hurdles, as you were talking about, is these police unions. You also have public employee unions, because what qualified immunity does, it protects the individual government employee from personal liability. So they themselves in these suits would be held liable. However, a study done by Joanna C. Schwartz out of UCLA, I believe she is one of the nation's foremost experts on qualified immunity, conducted a study that showed that over 99.5% of cases in which someone can get past that qualified immunity hurdle, the government employee is indemnified by their employer. So it's the city, the state, whatever department is the ones paying out these settlements, not the individual employee. So the whole tenet of qualified immunity, protecting these individual government employees from being personally liable in these cases, is a moot point. And the Supreme Court needs to revisit it. Congress needs to act. But until they do, we're going to keep on doing what we're doing.
So this is going to be a bit of a gruesome analogy, but I want people to really get the scope of what qualified immunity is. As many people in my audience know, that I was in the food industry for a few years before I got sick. I was a line cook. I took culinary school and everything. Keeping qualified immunity is like me being a cook in the kitchen. And let's say you got a steak or a burger, right? But I cooked it well done when you want it medium. And they bring the burger back to be what we call refired. So just put it back, or cook it, make a new one so that it's medium instead of well done, right? But I'm frustrated. you know. I got into a fight with my spouse. The dog peed, on my shoe, whatever. And so, out of my frustration, right, to the customer, I decide to spit on the burger that I refired out of retaliation, and then returned it just because. And then that customer finds out that I spat on that burger. Now that customer can actually sue me liability for it. But because of qualified immunity, they can't sue me. They can only sue the restaurant, but they can't sue me. Which means that if I can't be sued, I can jump from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, spitting in people's burgers with abandon, abusing people, and they have no way to actually hit me personally. Which means that I am absolved from responsibility for doing a crime against a person. Am I correct in that analogy when it comes to qualified immunity?
Yes. And you could even go further and say, you could stay at that same restaurant if that restaurant doesn't fire you, because that's often what happens. It's, 2 weeks paid vacation and right back in the thick of it. The officer who killed Donovan Lewis had hundreds of prior complaints. And you look at all these instances where it does get to the point of, killing of an unarmed person unjustifiably. You see so many prior incidents in which this could have been headed off if there was some sort of accountability. And I want to stress that this isn't just in those extreme cases where someone is murdered by a government agent. It is also the cases where, like Anthony Novak up in Parma, Ohio, he made a parody Facebook page of the Parma Police Department, just, having fun. And as is his free speech right, he was arrested. He was jailed for 3 days before he could make bail, missed a day of work out of that. He was put all the way through a felony jury trial in Parma, Ohio. He was found not guilty on First Amendment grounds by the jury. When he went to sue the police department and those involved, they were granted qualified immunity by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, federal court. And then when he attempted to appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court, they declined to hear his case just this past March. So he will never get restitution. Those individuals involved will never be held to account for the injustice they committed. And that is just in the grand scheme of things, that's a minor infraction against an individual for arresting them because they made a parody Facebook page and, no one was really physically hurt, but there were economic damages. He had to sit through a felony jury trial. He had to miss that time out of his life to play the dog and pony show of a police department that got its feelings hurt.
Yeah, basically, look, it's basically, oh my God, they made us look bad out of a parody. And because of that, you decide to abuse your power and arrest the guy, put a felony on his record. What? This is crazy. I'm just like, what in the world? Like, how is this allowed?
It's, I would like to ask the Supreme Court that. It's great though that we can end this on a state level, as it's been ended in New Mexico through the state legislature. It was ended in Colorado through the state legislature. It was ended in Nevada through the state Supreme Court. It was ended in New York City by city council. It was ended in Connecticut in very limited violations. I believe it is just violations of warrantless searches and seizure,
Yeah.
and I believe unlawful arrest, if I'm not mistaken. But there is a movement in the country, and it's been picking up over the past couple years, especially with so much attention being drawn to the root causes of the injustices in our criminal justice system
Yeah.
since the George Floyd protests.
Yeah. And the thing is that I think ultimately, it's really a dereliction of duty by the powers that be. And I'm one of those people who, you know, despite what some people may know about me, is that I'm a lot more radical in my beliefs regarding police than maybe some other shows you've been on. But I say that, we need to go further than just ending qualified immunity, but at least ending qualified immunity is a start, because ultimately, if we are going to sit here and allow have police, then I think honestly we should have a system where they're held accountable just like anybody else who has any type of position where they can literally affect the lives of people directly.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, you literally have the lives of people in your hands when you are in a governmental position when it comes to ending qualified immunity. You have, you should not be someone who you should not be someone who the state or the courts will look away from whenever you do something horrible. Because the thing is that we have noticed. I mean, look back to when I was a little kid. Yes, I'm that old. When I was a little kid, when they beat Rodney King, they beat him nearly to death. And the police officers didn't get any jail time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you or I were to do something like that, of course.
Right? Yeah, we'd go right to jail.
Yeah. And let's be honest, I would serve more jail time than you because, but at the same time, either one of us, just for doing something like that, just for doing something heinous like that. And don't get me started on the amount of rape kits that have been tested that are sitting in police departments all over this country, 250,000 of them.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them have the DNA of police officers? I would like to know.
Exactly. And, that's one of the reasons, or I guess the biggest reason why the Columbus Police Department Vice Division was disbanded was because they were raping sex workers. And it's, this Governor DeWine, he got elected in part saying that, we're going to test the rape kits, blah, blah, blah. Well, that hasn't been done. They're still sitting there untested. There's who knows who's out running the streets and, committing, these violations against people with no, the rape is so underreported in this country that, one kit could stop 3 or 4 or 5 others from happening.
Yeah. That's what makes me mad, is that there's so many people who would say, no, because we can't take away the rights of, the police officers because people will just sue, police departments with abandon. And that's not true, because the thing is that if you have proof, then guess what? It's going to happen. That's not a unreasonable position. And so, yeah, I mean, what do you say to people who say that they would just sue police departments and abuse that system if qualified immunity is ended? Like, what would your response to that be?
I'd say that's the biggest concern that people have when it comes to ending qualified immunity. And there are, two things that we address on that. It's one, that you're going to have to find an attorney who is, unless you're paying this attorney up front, who believes in the case enough that they think the case will win to justify investing dozens, if not hundreds of hours into a civil case. Then on the other hand, the amendment that we're proposing ends qualified immunity in much the same way that it was ended in New Mexico. And that is where the government employer, say it's the department, the city, the county, the state, whatever, they are the ones to be held financially liable in any civil cases arising out of this amendment. And so that kind of balances the concerns of, well, you're going to have officers thinking that they're going to go into bankruptcy if they make one small mistake, and which in some of these mistakes that, may be deserving. And, just, I wish I had the data in front of me, but Joanna C. Schwartz, I definitely recommend to anyone listening, check her out. She has vast amounts of data on this.
Let me tell you. You may not be saying it, but I'm going to say it. Look, if police officers if we end qualified immunity and police officers get bankrupt for the actions that they take against the people, good. I'm sipping tea on that one, because the thing is that if it makes them more careful, why is that a bad thing? That's my question. Why is, like, for instance, if they want, they can have liability insurance. They can have that, right? Yeah. Look, it's the same thing with same thing with doctors. Doctors have liability insurance just in case, right? What if you're a bus driver? What if you're a pilot? You need that liability insurance just in case you do something wrong.
And that's something we've actually spoken with legislators here in the Ohio legislature is, maybe introducing a bill that would mandate professional liability insurance, because, especially where you have a Republican supermajority in our state legislature that we have in Ohio, you're going to get further with those kinds of free market solutions than you are basing something off of, well, we need to improve our justice system, because it's often not reason enough for them to take action.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but.
Yeah, I want to get your opinion on this. I actually talked about this on RBN a couple months back. What was that, a month and a half ago? Probably about 6 weeks ago. But this is an article about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., since we're talking about people in power. Of course, a lot of people know that he's running to be the commander-in-chief of the United States. He's running to be the president, right? He actually had an interview with Black Press USA about his candidacy. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight was regarding his thoughts on qualified immunity. So this is what he said to Black Press USA. It says, in a one-on-one interview with Black Press of America, Kennedy spoke about his relentless focus on combating environmental racism, ending qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, and addressing the alarming racial disparities within the American medical system. And so he's talking about ending qualified immunity in this system. And Kennedy said that Black Americans are going to be a principal priority for me, particularly in ending the fear of dangerous interaction with law enforcement. The article continues, says he also pledged to move to end qualified immunity, which protects police officers from personal liability in the event of a lawsuit. And he said there is no incentive for individuals to change bad behavior. We need systemic changes. We need to remove qualified immunity, which would make it necessary for an individual to consider his liability with every interaction. Every good economic system should incentivize good behavior and punish bad behavior. We need to have that. So that's what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said. Okay? Now,
I agree 100% with what he said right there.
Okay. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this because this happened a month later. So, here's what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said a month later.
On your website, you said you want to remove qualified immunity and transform the police. What does that look like for you to transform the police?
Yeah, I don't, if it says on my website that we're going to remove qualified immunity, that's wrong.
On your website, it says transform the police. In an interview, you said you wanted to remove.
Yeah, I don't, that is an error. We do not, I do not want to, I don't think it's feasible to remove qualified immunity.
Okay.
I think the police are having a hard enough time hiring people right now, and that a lot of interactions that are, the police have nothing to do with civil rights or race, and we can't put individual police officers in a position where anybody who has an interaction with them can then sue them individually. And
so you don't have any plans in place to remove qualified immunity?
No, I'm not going to remove qualified immunity, but I'm going to use the Justice Department.
Your thoughts?
I don't think America's any stranger to politicians saying one thing one day and saying the exact opposite the next day. It's disheartening, I guess, to hear him do that 180. I don't know if it's what kind of political movement he's trying to go with that, whether it's not offending people who back the blue, whether it's not offending the police unions, whether there's some sort of endorsement he's seeking, or some sort of some donors who don't want a certain message getting out. I'm not sure about that. But, that's why we're taking a citizen-initiated constitutional amendment and placing it on the ballot ourselves, because we've tried going through the politicians to get this ended here in Ohio, and it's you can't trust a politician. I'm sorry, but you can't. And it sounds like he was being very politicky.
Yeah.
It's. I wish I had more insight on that, but I guess it boils down to politicians are gonna politic.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's the best way to put it. So you basically just went into how you want to circumvent politicians in order to get qualified immunity as law within your state of Ohio. If you can go over that, exactly how are we going to get that done in Ohio? Because one of the things that I appreciate is a lot of times when states start to do this especially from a citizen ballot initiative perspective, this also gives ideas to other peoples of other states, namely like my state of Florida, that would give us the idea, hey, we're sick and tired of getting our heads bashed in by police and getting shot in the back. Why don't we just end qualified immunity instead of trying to get a politician to do it or trying to elect an attorney general or a state attorney to do it? We'll just do it ourselves. So can you explain like how that process goes about and, what's needed in order to get this process going?
Sure. And there's about 26 states out there that allow for some sort of citizen-initiated constitutional amendment or law. We have the great fortune, thanks to people who worked hard over 110 years ago to give us this right to place an amendment on the ballots. Currently, as it stands, the process is that you have to get your language first that you want to be put in the Constitution or put in the law. Then you have to write a summary for it, and both of those are typically done by attorneys. And then you go out and you collect 1,000 signatures to submit that summary to the Attorney General. The Attorney General either approves the summary language and certifies it, or he rejects it. After Attorney General approval, it goes to the ballot board here in Ohio. So the ballot board determines whether what you're proposing is one single issue and should appear on the ballot as one single issue, or if it's multiple issues, and if you should collect signatures for separate issues. After the ballot board makes its determination, then you have to collect signatures equal to 10% of the votes cast in the most recent gubernatorial election. In Ohio, we had about 4.2 million people vote in the last gubernatorial election. So you need about 420,000 ballot signatures here in Ohio to get something on the ballot. And with a standard validity rate of 50% here in Ohio for those signatures, because we do not have online petitioning, it's all in person, you have to get about double what you need. So we'll have to get about 850,000 signatures by the first week of July to get this on the November 2024 ballot. And then once you submit those signatures, then it is all hands on deck, getting the word out about this, convincing Ohio voters that this is something that we ought to have in Ohio, that a government accountable to the people is important for us here, and just getting those people out to vote.
Yeah. So I just want to share here the amendment that you guys actually have on your website, the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. And it's actually available for PDF download. So if you guys would like to, especially if you're in Ohio, I highly recommend you guys actually get this and share this so that you guys can, so people in Ohio, or if you have family in Ohio, friends in Ohio, what have you, share this with them and share why ending qualified immunity is actually beneficial to all the people of Ohio. Because if anybody believes in holding people accountable, especially state representatives of the state, so whether it be police and law enforcement, or you could be represented by the state, in a different, entity, and they may do you wrong in a certain way, and you want to actually, hold them accountable. You can do that, hold them personally accountable by ending qualified immunity. And it will force them to actually be more careful in how they deal with citizens. And don't we all want them to be more careful in how they deal with us? That's the question I think a lot of people really need to ask. Like, do you want police to be more careful?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's honestly, it's pretty wonderful that exact question there is, do you want police to be careful? Do you want them to respect your rights? And that's where we're not getting, not just people on the left, not just liberals, and not just, moderates. We're also getting pretty right-wing people who, there are some people in our coalition whom I disagree on a great many things with them. But there are people, the MAGA patriot groups, as they call themselves, they're on our side with this too.
Wow. Okay.
Which is, they say politics makes strange bedfellows. And it's very true, especially with this issue. And I'll track back to New Mexico again, how they ended it through the state legislature. That was a joint lobbying effort by ACLU, Ben and Jerry's Campaign to End Qualified Immunity, and Koch brothers' dark money group, Americans for Prosperity. They all yes, the Koch brothers' dark money group, Americans for Prosperity, worked together with ACLU and Ben and Jerry's Campaign to End Qualified Immunity to lobby the state legislature of New Mexico to end qualified immunity in the state of New Mexico. And they were successful. It is, like they say, politics makes strange bedfellows. There are some organizations you would never expect to come together on any single issue, and they are coming together to end qualified immunity.
Okay, Kyle. Pardon my French, but that was a mind fuck right now. So you basically just told me that billionaires helped end qualified immunity?
Yes, absolutely.
Because the police work for the people who own the properties. And I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, it's obviously a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Hey,
I was not expecting to be gobsmacked on my own show today.
it's and I will say, Americans for Prosperity has been a great ally in this fight here in Ohio. I mean, when it comes to criminal justice reform, apparently they're pretty on point. They worked with ACLU here in Ohio last legislative session to try and end cash bail in the state of Ohio. The legislature did not like what they were doing and decided to put an amendment to the Ohio Constitution on the ballot to put cash bail in our Constitution, and it passed, which that they outmaneuvered ACLU and the Koch brothers on that one. But
Wow.
I mean, I love finding all these allies, and especially when ACLU and Ben & Jerry's and AFP work together on that one single issue, they might find other issues that they agree on.
I mean,
and work together to get those passed.
Look, I honestly if
I'm not asking you to say the billionaires are the good ones.
No, I understand. But my thing is like, if you can talk them into doing something that's actually for the good of the people, I'm going to applaud it. Because, look, that's how you do it. Sometimes you can actually talk people who you have a lot of disagreements with into moving into the same direction as you. There was, like, for instance, I'm a big proponent of a full nationalization of our healthcare system. And you can actually argue a full nationalization of our healthcare system from a right-wing perspective. It's actually not that difficult. The thing is, you just have to know the facts and figures. And so, for instance, talking about ending qualified immunity is a personal responsibility kind of direction. It's like, okay, yeah, you need to be responsible for the actions that you take as a police officer, just like anybody else. And a lot of people on the right will actually get on board with that. And so really, qualified immunity is more of a corporate protection of the police force that protects private property, rather than a conservative or right-wing type of. It's more of a top-down type of policy than a left-right policy.
I would agree with that. Yes.
So that's what it feels like to me. One of the things that I actually wanted to do, because I typically do not highlight comments, but there was some comments from Roger Meadows. He connected with you guys a few weeks ago on Rockfin. I'm sorry, on he connected with you guys regarding the ballot initiatives that you are trying to pass in Ohio. And he was the one that actually was, that recommended, me to talk to you, which I am very glad that he did. He had a couple comments as well to say. Roger Meadows, thank you so much for the tip. He says, it is important for everyone to take note that they are specifically running this initiative as an amendment to be ratified into the Ohio Constitution, not running it as a law, which would mean the government can come back and repeal or alter to weaken it without having to ask the voters, unlike they would if it was approved, ratified as an amendment. If you want to just comment on that just for a second.
Oh, yeah, and that's 100% the reason why we're pursuing the constitutional amendment route and not an amendment to the Ohio Revised Code, because you can pass something one day, and like Roger said, you can turn the state legislature, which is a Republican supermajority, can
Mhm.
turn around the next day and say, actually, we don't like that. We're either going to neuter it, gut it, or get rid of it entirely.
So that adds weight to it. That makes it more stronger. It's like, yeah, no, you guys can't really do that. It makes it part of the fundamentals of the law rather than making it kind of a low-hanging fruit that they can just, turn over.
Right. If this passes and they wanted to change it or repeal it, they would have to place an amendment on the ballot for us Ohio voters to vote on. The only way you can amend the Ohio Constitution is by having voters decide that, yes, we want to amend our Constitution.
Gotcha. And just to let you guys know, here in Florida, we also have a Republican supermajority. So we have a majority in the state house. We have a supermajority in the state house. I think it's in the Senate, the Senate, Florida Senate, and then in the House we have a majority. And then we also have the governor, who is DeSantis. So, yikes! But yeah, so. Let me see. Roger also says it is not enough for states like Maryland.
I think Maine is ME,
Maine.
if I'm not mistaken.
I always get them mixed up. So Maine, Idaho, Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Utah, to have the citizen ballot initiative right, but only for voters to pass their own laws. They must push further and fight to get candidates in the state legislature, preferably independent, to hold leverage that would force a legislative initiative to vote to place initiatives before voters to ratify that would allow them to enshrine their own rights. If you want to speak on that a little bit.
Yes, I would say on the, I wholeheartedly agree. Right now, party politicians, they oftentimes put party over politics or the division between the two sides over what's best for the people, and sometimes what these politicians even actually believe. It's very difficult, though, to get an independent. Thank you, Comrade Kitty. I will. You can go to oceqi.org/volunteer to sign up to volunteer for signatures. We definitely need all the volunteers we can get. But circling back to independent candidates, it is almost impossible to get an independent elected here in Ohio because they don't have that party infrastructure backing their candidacy. They have to get more signatures than party candidates to get on the ballot. And it's just, you have to break that voter mindset of Republican and Democrat to actually get an independent elected, because oftentimes voting for an independent or a third party candidate is seen as wasting your vote or throwing away your vote. And I know Rank the Vote Ohio is seeking to get ranked choice voting here in Ohio, so that, you can say there's independent, Democrat, Republican, you can vote your first choice independent and your second choice, either the Republican or the Democrat. So if that independent doesn't win, your vote automatically, instant runoff, goes to your second choice. And, he said, Roger also stated that, libertarians like the Koch brothers, like Larry Sharp and Ron Paul, want to end qualified immunity. And that's very true. It was actually the Libertarian Congressman, Justin Amash, who authored the qualified immunity bill, and he and Ayanna Pressley were the two who spearheaded that effort in the federal Congress. Obviously got nowhere. We still have qualified immunity. But yes, I would say yes, it is a waste trying to work with the lawmakers oftentimes, especially on this issue.
Of course. In fact, let me read the tip that Roger left on Rockman. He says, the Kochs and the libertarians want to end qualified immunity is a big in the libertarian community. Larry Sharp, Ron, and Rand Paul wish to end it as well. Kyle, never waste your time talking with lawmakers when you can do it yourself. All they will do is stonewall you from getting it on the ballot. I saw the same thing with the sponsor for Massachusetts public banks and Medicare for All, stonewalled voters from putting it on the ballot. He says Florida also allows for citizen ballot initiatives for amendments. However, unfortunately for Florida, it's 60% required for approval. I'm glad Ohio voters came out last month and shut that down. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you and your listeners are familiar with what he's referencing and voting it down last month. The Ohio General Assembly placed an amendment to the Ohio Constitution on the ballot for us to vote on an illegal August special election that they had outlawed a year or two ago because there was such low voter turnout. It would make it to where instead of requiring a 50% vote, simple majority to pass these constitutional amendments at the ballot, it would require 60% of the vote. And then it would also expand, it would also restrict the petitioning to where instead of getting 5% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial election from 44 out of 88 counties, you would have to get that from all 88 counties. And then it would have also removed, in Ohio, we have a 10-day grace period. If you don't get enough signatures in your initial submission, you have 10 days to make up for that. This would have gotten rid of that. So say you came up 12 signatures short in one county. That's thousands, if not tens of thousands of volunteer hours wasted. That is oftentimes millions of dollars wasted. It was a very vindictive thing for the General Assembly to do. It would have made it pretty much impossible to get anything on the ballot through a citizen-initiated process here in Ohio, and I'm glad we came out and defeated it. The Ohio Coalition and Qualified Immunity is one of the opponents to that. Common Cause, League of Women Voters, all these organizations, and surprisingly enough, it's maybe the only time we will ever be on the same side, the FOP here in Ohio came out against it.
See ya. See ya.
It's
the FOP.
The FOP came out against it. Yes.
What? I should have put some liquor in this tea. I should have got me a hot toddy. No, I was not expecting you to be throwing all these curveballs to me today, Kyle.
Listen, Ohio is just a curveball state. I'm not doing anything. I'm just speaking the truth here.
Part of me wants to be like, are you bullshitting me?
No. The list of opponents to issue one are online. Anybody can look it up. The Koch brothers working with, ACLU to Qualified Immunity New Mexico can definitely look that up. Ben & Jerry's praises AFP in their press release about ending Qualified Immunity in New Mexico. I mean, Ohio is such a fantastic state when it comes to politics because on the surface, there's a lot of polarization. The politicians polarize a lot. But when it comes down to it, our organizations in the state as a whole and the people in this state, we get down to it. And we say, okay, this is BS. We need to get rid of it. And typically we see through, the propaganda when it comes to state issues.
I am so glad you do, because that's pretty awesome. I mean, the fact that you can get, essentially your political enemies to, join forces with you in order to really combat this, that gives me hope, actually, because a lot of times you have some people who may be on the right and they, like, for instance, there was a physician, I forget his name, but he's a Republican, and he came out for single-payer healthcare, basically saying that single-payer healthcare is actually a much better system than the system that we have now. And so Wendell Potter, I think his name was Dr. Wendell Potter, he came out for single payer healthcare, which is a left position when it, in our eyes, but he argues it from a right-wing position. And so just because you live in a red state, do not sit there and go, well, these people, they want to back the blue. They never want to do this. No, because a lot of times, a lot of people believe in personal accountability in these states. And so and you never know, there may be some people who are on the right that have actually been abused by the state, by police, that are saying, you know what, they shouldn't have this. So do not allow that thinking of saying, oh, I'm in a red state, I can't allow this to happen. And if you're in a blue state, even more so, right? So it doesn't matter. People actually believe that people should be held accountable for their actions, especially when it comes to how they deal with citizens.
Oh, yeah. And it surprises me that more blue states haven't ended qualified immunity.
Right?
What's California doing? What's New York doing? What's Vermont doing? I wish I knew the answer to that. I've been focused on Ohio.
Of course.
This whole time, we've got a lot going on here. You could take up an entire lifetime of a person. I hope it doesn't take up my lifetime. But, there are so many states where it seems like it would be much easier to get something like this passed. Yeah. And I don't know if there's just not the initiative there, if there's no real movement to get that done. But, we're hoping to start a national conversation here with this. Qualified immunity needs to be a household term. People need to know what it is all over this country, and they need to know how it impacts our system of justice, how it affects the trust that people have in our public institutions, and the integrity of our public institutions.
Definitely. So, yeah, as far as getting this overturned, as a constitutional amendment, I think that honestly, this is, as religious people say, they're doing God's work. So I would just like to share this in the chat as well to people who are wanting to volunteer within getting this going. Share this widely and explain to people. And it's easy, because the crazy part about it is that they actually did all the work. You guys did all the work for people to explain why they should be against qualified immunity. I love that you did this, and this is something that I just want to share just really quick, because you guys actually did this for people. It says what is qualified immunity and then why end it. So the work is already done for you. And then it talks about the timeline of examples about qualified immunity, like 2020, the death of George Floyd. 2019, Supreme Court declines to hear a case that would have clarified the scope of qualified immunity. And so it goes all the way down to 1967. So for Pearson versus Bray. So this also gives the timeline. So you have a great resource here regarding qualified immunity as well.
Oh, yeah. We hope to equip people as much as possible to not just educate themselves, but to educate the people around them, the people, their family, their friends, their communities, their colleagues. We need to be having this conversation. We need to be having it everywhere, honestly. And if anybody listening wants to get involved, wants to, take some sort of action to end qualified immunity in Ohio, you can sign up to volunteer on our website. It's oceqi.org. If you're not in Ohio, you can always donate. You can follow us on social media. You can amplify our social media posts. You can amplify the videos like this podcast that we're on. You can share it far and wide so people can actually hear the conversation going on about ending qualified immunity in Ohio.
Definitely. I just wanted to ask you, have you ever heard of the website 10 Demands for Justice?
I don't believe I have.
Okay, I'll share it with you really quick. Of course, a lot of people know I'm part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. One of my colleagues on Revolutionary Blackout Network, his name is Nick Cruz. He's actually one of the co-founders of 10 Demands for Justice, along with Zoya and as well as the rapper Awkward. They actually came up with a website called 10 Demands for Justice, The Road to Abolition. So they are police abolitionists and for all intents and purposes. And so they also go over the demands for justice. And the first one, it says defund the police and reallocate resources, demilitarize the police, eliminate discriminatory policing and sentencing, institute complete law enforcement transparency. It sees independently investigate all crimes, representation, oversight, and safety measures, and strategic counter-protest violence. It talks about reparations and the war on drugs and carceral punishment. But ending qualified immunity is actually part of this this one. I think it's under number 4. It says, let me see. It says create an independent database for police crimes, brutality, and misconduct. Implement independent community-led police department reviews and data. Require public reporting of all police records and schedules. Immediately terminate and eliminate pensions of any officer found guilty of manipulating data, covering their badge, turning off their body cam or dash cam, or illegally stopping a citizen from filming. And so this actually goes into a lot of what is in line with ending qualifying immunity as well. And so this is actually a great resource as well. There are videos that actually explain what each demand entails. And so, if you want to just give it a look in your own personal time, I'll send you the link. But just wanted to let you guys know that there's also other resources that work in tandem with things like ending qualified immunity as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll definitely give it a look.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that with you as well. But one of the things that I want to encourage people to do is to make sure that you go to that website. Apologies that Miss Cynthia was not able to make it, but she's a new great grandmother today.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, so that's a good reason to miss out. So I became a great uncle. So look, I would have skipped out today too if my great nephew was being born today. So yeah, I definitely want to congratulate her on the new addition to the family too. So I want to make sure I do that too to Miss Cynthia. And so if you guys can go to oceqi.org. So I'm putting that up there so that you guys can see that as well, because it is important that you guys I also shared in the chat. So if you guys already have the link, as well as the link is also in the description below too. So any other final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience as well regarding getting this this draconian type of policy ended? Like, what would your final thoughts like to be?
I would say look into qualified immunity more. Sign up to volunteer if you can here in Ohio. Sign up to follow us on social media. Donate if you're able to. Share interviews like this. Get the word out. Start movements in your own state if you're able to. We need to end qualified immunity. We need to end it nationwide. And sometimes politicians aren't going to do the work that we elect them to do. Then we have to do the work ourselves.
Beautifully said. Thank you so very much, Mr. Kyle Pierce, for joining. Kyle Pierce, of course, is the director. He is the director for the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. And so thank you so very much to Mr. Kyle Pierce for coming on. And I hope to have you guys on in a few months to see the progress. And so we can continue to talk about this issue as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having us on. We'd love to be back, give you a bigger status update, how we're doing, and what the roadmap is going to look like.
Thank you so very much. And give my greetings and my congratulations to Miss Cynthia.
Absolutely, for sure.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So that was a wonderful conversation. I am very excited to be able to have this conversation. As you guys know, that I am a big proponent of doing whatever we can in order to make sure that people who are disenfranchised within our communities, that we liberate ourselves from the stranglehold of what a lot of police and state actors do to us. I am one of those that am an abolitionist, is really, to rethink policing and public safety in a way where it actually benefits us rather than the people at the top. And so one step towards that is ending qualified immunity. They're doing the damn thing out there in Ohio, which I am very excited about. I think this was very important to show, not just to people internationally, but also here in Florida as well, because that's also very important. Is that Miss Cynthia there? I see. Okay, I'll bring you back on just a second.
This is Cynthia Brown, founder and chair of the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. She is a powerhouse.
She came in at the last minute. She was like, "Hey, let's come on in. How you doing?"
Fine, thanks. I know you did real good, Sarah.
Mm-hmm. So it's so nice to finally meet you and to talk to you a little bit. Just to as the final thoughts before we head on out, I just would like to ask you, what was your motivation and what was the main driver to you for what was the main motivation and driver to for you to want to end qualified immunity? Was there a particular situation that happened in your life or something that you saw that really affected you?
Yes, my main motivation was the loss of my nephew, who was actually killed by Columbus police in 2017. He was the first body cam case, period, in the state of Ohio, where you saw a man get killed on camera and take his last breath. As a matter of fact, they lowered the volume down for the first 60 seconds and they covered the camera up 5 times too, so the public couldn't see what they were doing. So they shot my nephew twice in his back. When he hit the ground, they shot him in his face and in his neck. Of course, the officers were found justifiable killing. They got qualified immunity. They said they feared for their life. So that's what started me down this journey, looking for police accountability, because my family got 0 zip.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Wow.
And we also have another. Wait a minute. We also have another committee chair. Her husband, Sean Rowe, was killed by police too. He's white, so this doesn't go black-white. This is a human issue. That's how we look at it. He was shot 8 times in his own home after he'd done 2 tours in Iraq, Iran. He was suffering from post-stress traumatic syndrome, and they got a call. What kind of call is that? Like a
he was swatted by his neighbor, making up false stories, calling 911, and eventually they put a sting operation together. And I mean, they used a mortar on his house. They left a hole in his roof. They repaired exactly 0 of the damage that they did, and Jenny Sue Rowe, his widow, is having to live with that reality every single day when she wakes up and she sees the damage still done to her house.
These stories are so important because they really take us from above and put us at ground level when it comes to why these policies need to end. Because I couldn't imagine that happening. One of my brothers experienced police brutality a few years ago, and I don't think he really saw any type of restitution from it. but he's still alive, right? He's still alive. He's still well, and he's okay. And so when it comes to stories like this just, I mean, the outrage, it really is what I feel that drives you both into this work, because I just couldn't imagine, you know, how is your family doing since then, as far as that crime that was committed against your nephew?
Well, he leaves behind 4 children, and they're going to be fatherless to a senseless, murder. So at the end of the day, his mom just learned to, deal with it. She goes day by day, some good days, some bad days. But we want to prevent any more, excuse me, loss of life and get this, ballot initiative passed.
Yeah. Look, like I said to everybody in the audience, if you guys have not, if you're not in Ohio, if you guys can donate, please make sure to donate. If you are unable to, you still have a voice. Take the link, share it. Just talk about how qualified immunity is ending. It needs to be ended so that we can actually hold police accountable for the actions that they take. And if you just word it that way, a lot of people can get on board with that. And just like what Kyle was saying, that, they have people who are on the right that are on board with it too. So yeah, wow. That hurts, man. That really does. But I just want to thank you for being on, and showing and then sharing your story as well. So we got the personal side, as well as we got the informational side as to why ending qualified immunity is so important. Before you guys head off, Miss Cynthia, what is your thoughts that you would like to share before we head out?
I would like to share with the audience how important it is to end, qualified immunity, not only in Ohio, but in America. We know that the George Floyd Policing Act stalled in the Senate because of the filibuster. They didn't have the votes. So therefore, it's up to each individual states. And like Kyle said, if the states are able to put it on the ballot, we encourage them to watch us in Ohio and use our success as case precedents moving forward, because we're claiming victory here in Ohio. So like Kyle said, you can volunteer, donate that $19.82, because all dollars add up to help us, in our quest for liberty here in Ohio.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so very much, Miss Cynthia and Mr. Kyle, for coming on and sharing your knowledge as well as your experience. This really, it's really humanized it further. And I think that a lot of people will get a great benefit out of knowing this, so that they can push for it in their state, so we can get this done nationwide. So thank you so very much for coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. You both have a wonderful day, and congratulations to you, Miss Cynthia, on the new addition to your family. I am so excited for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.